I am just not a completionist. When it comes to games, I try to get everything that I can. I try and find all the little mini bosses, all the secrets, everything that I can along the way. But generally speaking, once I get to that last boss and defeat it, and then those credits start to roll, I check out. So why am I still playing Annayia? Annayia, Life After Gods was released on Steam on March 27th, 2025 by Exogenesis Studios. This is the first game to be released by this studio, but the studio boasts veterans in game making with people who have worked on such acclaimed games as Warhammer, Rogue Trader, and Pathfinder. It also has visual artists who have worked with the likes of Blizzard and Disney. While the game hasn't been out for very long as the time of this review, the game studio is active within the community and has been working on some serious quality of life fixes which have made the game even better than the time when I played the demo or even when I was playing the game itself. Annayia was originally for sale on Kickstarter, which raised a little over $50,000, but unfortunately I didn't hear about the game until the campaign was over. I found out about the demo and fell in love with the art style and the challenging combat, and so I purchased Annayia on day one. Despite having owned Annayia for about 2 months now, I've only just finished the game fairly recently. There's a lot of game here, but honestly, it just didn't have as much time to play it as I wanted to. For those that know me, again, I'm not a completionist. I often take my time to do everything that I can, but once I defeat the final boss, I am checked out. I will say, however, despite some flaws, Annayia has made me curious to go back and try some stuff that I missed, but we'll get back to that later. Annayia has a pair of power gauntlets that only she can wield. The gauntlets can be used as a pair of swords, a mace, or as, well, fists. In a unique move, Annayia lets you choose which weapon you unlock and in which order, but honestly you'll have all three in the first 10% of the game or so, so it really doesn't matter. The mace was my least favorite in the demo, so I went with it last. And it was mildly hampering because some of the level design does require you to have the mace fairly early on, but more on that soon. Each weapon has 4 different attacks, a defense option, and a unique mobility mode which allows you to traverse the map. With the weapon system in Annayia, there's 3 different ways you can change them, and you can do them anytime. Simply go to the menu, go to settings, and then you get controls, and you can change from carousel, round, or button. Carousel, you can switch using the right and left bumpers to go back and forth between the weapons, which I find a little imprecise when I'm trying to jump through and I have to use all 3 of my weapons to make it up a certain corridor. I didn't really like that. One of the new ways they had that didn't have this when I first started playing the game is the button system. Now, theoretically, this sounds great because you can switch directly to whatever weapon you want. Unfortunately, the way they do this is left, right, and down on the directional pad. And most of the time when I'm jumping or needing to switch weapons, I'm using my left thumb to control Annayia, not to switch which weapon she is. So that doesn't quite work as well as I was hoping it would. It would be better if there was a system where I could use my right thumb to do it, but there's only so many buttons on a controller, so they did the best they could. The third option, and the one that I used, is the round system. Now, I don't know why it's called round, it's a menu. But if you hold the right bumper, you get this menu, and then you can choose which one you want. The nice thing is, you can tell that when I'm in the air, I pause, giving me plenty of time to figure out what exact weapon I need for the exact situation at hand. This is incredibly handy, but it really does hamper the flow of the game. So if you're okay with that, it's great. Now, in fairness, falling also hampers the flow of the game, so I think this is probably the best way to go, but your mileage may vary. Each weapon has multiple abilities, and each ability has its own ability tree, although web might be a better term. The webs are large and can feel overwhelming, but once you understand their playstyle, it becomes significantly easier to know which path you want to go down. And since making one choice often eliminates other choices, you quickly find the webs getting smaller and smaller to the point that I'd maxed out my blades fairly early on and didn't really have a whole lot to spend my resources on. The combat itself is quite challenging at first, but I found that I quickly became overpowered, and that severely hampered the combat in this game. I mentioned all the attacks you have access to and the multiple weapons, but well before the halfway point, my blades were godlike and gave me no reason to try the other weapons during combat. The fists can only be used while standing still and have a very short range, and the mace also can only be used while standing still and takes 3 business days to connect. And with most of your targets being fairly quick, a lot of times you end up swinging at absolutely nothing. The fist does provide you with a nifty shield, and the mace can magnetically pull projectiles towards you and absorb them, but the blades can parry, and again, I just never felt the need to use the other weapons. We will discuss the augments later, but I found a few synergies that really made weapon switching unnecessary and kinda killed the combat for me. As for the enemies, there are quite a few varieties, and they all look really good, moving and acting a little differently. None of the enemies feel cheap or overly annoying. Some are harder than others, but none were unfair. The bosses of Annayia are all really cool and where the combat shines. For the most part, you can actually choose the order you want to do some of these in, which can be fun if you want a bit more of a challenging, or frustrating if you're somewhere you're not supposed to be yet. Seriously, screw this guy. By the end of the game, I was one-shotting enemies and even killing bosses in only a few hits, which was really disappointing for how hard the bosses were at the beginning of the game. Combat in Inayah is really fun to start, but it does slow down by the end as you become way stronger and the enemies don't tend to keep up. Now sure, I could have switched to hard mode at any time, maybe that's on me, but I started the game in normal, I wanted to beat the game in normal and see what it had to offer, so I stayed with it the way that it was. The level design in Annayia is decent enough, but not free from criticisms. The biomes are all really cool, but honestly, you spend way too much time in the train station area. Not only at the beginning of the game, but also as the game goes on. It's kind of a hub level, and it looks good, but a little more variety would have been great. The robot or Terminator area was probably my favorite looking area, but you just don't do enough there. You don't really spend much time there at all. The individual maps are oddly deceiving. I was constantly looking at a room and thinking I would take significantly longer to traverse than it actually did. Maybe this is just a me thing and no one else will have this issue, but it did bother me constantly. As for the world map, it was awful at launch because you couldn't zoom into the individual rooms at all. And since the world was just a series of blocks without the ability to zoom in, it felt like complete guesswork to decide where you wanted to go. Add to that, the doors and the blocks aren't even in the right places sometimes, and it was infuriating. Since then, they've added the ability to zoom into every room, regardless of where you are, as well as adding a fog of war and changing where the doors are so they do actually make sense on the blocks, and this makes a huge improvement to the game. Huge shout out to Exogenesis Games for continuing to make this game better and improve it. It's been out for a couple of months. They've already put out some serious quality of life fixes, and I really appreciate it. This game already has its score for now, but honestly, if you guys keep going, the score might go up in, say, 6 months or a year or something if I ever come back to this one. There are save towers and fast travel stations all around the world, and both show up on your world map, so it's always easy to find them. And the quests and side quests are also on your map at all times, so in that sense, the map is very handy. I absolutely love that the save towers are all slightly different based on who or what lives in that area. It's a small touch, but it's super cool, and it's appreciated. Now, as for the actual ability to traverse the map, this is where the majority of the 3-weapon system comes into play. You can see that with the mace, I have the ability to magnetically pull myself to certain objects. The sword, I have a double jump, and the fist, I have not only a blast, but also ability to cling on to certain areas. Now you can also wall jump on certain orange walls, or just grab onto ledges where these embers are sticking out. All three work together to make a fantastic experience when you're trying to traverse the map. However, having to switch constantly using the mini menu does slow the pace down a little bit from a game that is otherwise absolutely silky smooth. Some moves, like the double jump and the dash, are tied to implants, and with how basic they feel and how necessary I felt they were, I kind of feel like I only ever had 4 augment slots to play around with instead of 6. This is obviously a choice, and your mileage may vary, but for me, this was less than ideal. Overall, the movement feels incredibly smooth, and the platforming never feels bad. That said, it never feels complex or overly interesting either. The game has multiple difficulties, including a custom mode where you can turn up the combat difficulty and down the exploration difficulty, or vice versa. Exploration difficulty would include things like adding additional platforms so that certain areas are easier to navigate. I've never seen this option in a Metroidvania before, and honestly, it's kind of cool. Besides the 3 weapons and the insane amount of skill trees in the game, you also get a little robot called Sputnik, which can unlock doors and activate platforms for you. You can see that this orb is turned off, and there's nothing I can do with it. It does say I can use the left trigger, but it's not turned on, so I can't. What I have to do is go to the menu, go down to Sputnik, click on him, control Sputnik to go up here, click on it with Sputnik, go back to the menu, back to Annayia, switch to my flail, grab it, jump over, and then I'm able to clear the boundary. It's a lot of work for one little jump, but it does work. It is unfortunate how many times you have to do this though, because this should be a much simpler process when it is. Honestly, you're never in one of these places without Sputnik, so it's not even necessary to unlock him before you can get to this area. It's just a time waster, and it's a little unfortunate to see. There are multiple sections where you need Sputnik to carry blue or gold ooze to open a door, and you can only carry ooze for about 50 seconds before Sputnik gets tired and drops it. I found this to be amusing at first, but as the canisters got further and further away from the doors you need, they eventually get to the point where they're running from multiple rooms to get to the door where you need to go. The problem is, you sometimes won't even know which canister you're supposed to use to get to the door you're getting to, so you will be searching around for quite some time even to figure it out. As someone with no interest in speedrunning, this was not for me. If all the pots and doors had been in the same areas, I would have been a bit of a bigger fan. But sometimes you have to really traverse the map to get where you need to go, including at one point I had to use a fast travel to figure out how to get one pot to the door that I needed it to. This was a cool mechanic once or twice, but it reuses it over and over again and never really adds variety to change it up. You're always kind of just doing the same thing, just from further distances. It would have been interesting to see them change it a little bit so you had a bit more variety. You also have an implant system. And what the implants are is basically bonuses to your character. Some of them are incredibly class specific, so if you're not going to use the flail, you'll never use some of the bonuses that are flail specific. However, some of them are so incredibly basic, such as a double jump and a dash, that you're never really going to leave home without them. So even though you have 6 options, you're likely only going to ever use 4 of them. However, you'll see at the bottom of the screen, it does give you multiple save files. So if you do want to have a boss killer mode or a traversal mode, you can easily do that. Now, I obviously only used 3. I didn't really need all 6 of them, but they are there as an option if you really want to tinker around. That said, I was able to create an absolute boss of a character who was constantly passively healing herself, as well as doing insane amounts of damage, which made me feel like a god for a bit, but kinda bored as the enemies clearly couldn't keep up with me. Well, most enemies anyways. Seriously, screw this guy. The last major upgrade is the flower injector. This is your healing system, and some of them will also provide you with additional damage boosts. Early on, these are very useful as you will be healing a lot. You can only have 1 injector active at a time, but honestly, that's fine. As the game continues, as I said, I found passive healings and I didn't even really have to use the injector all that much. Maybe that's what the damage boost is there for, but again, I was already doing so much damage, I really didn't need the additional bonus. You will get a little bit of gold from enemies, but the main way to earn is to attack gold packages called pinatas. Gold can be used to upgrade your weapons, but once I finished all of my blade abilities, I ended up stockpiling gold, and then I found an item that does bonus damage based on how much unspent gold you have, and combat fell off a cliff. I was already not interested in the other weapons, and now I'm actively incentivized to ignore them.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
So from this point on, every non-boss character became a one-hit kill. Every pinata pal became an achievement hunt instead of an in-game reward, and every boss only took 3 to 5 hits. Could I have taken off the upgrade? Sure, but why? If you're gonna give it to me, I'm gonna use it. The upgrade system in Annayia is really cool, and I really do like it. It's a little unfortunate that you seem to not need to upgrade after a certain point. Like once you get to a certain level, you are maxed and the enemies are nowhere close to you. Again, I could have turned it up to hard. Maybe that's on me. Maybe that's what I'll do the next time I play it. I don't know. But here on this round, it was a little disappointing to find that the challenging combat I fell in love with was simply not there by the halfway point in the game. I won't go into any story specifics beyond the first half hour or so, but I will discuss my general impression of the story and the vibe of the game. Annayia starts off as a little girl traveling with her father and what is left of her people, when the caravan is attacked by the Ironskins. Her father and tribe are killed and she is thrown into the abyss where she meets Khonshu, a wise and caring mentor. Khonshu raises her until she's old enough to wield her father's magic gauntlets and seek out her tribe and her revenge. It's a pretty basic origin story to start, but it branches out in interesting ways and introduces a bunch of characters that keep it moving, so I'm okay with it. You soon discover a bunch of misfits you make your allies, and some shadier characters you take quests from. There are mild RPG elements presented to you in the form of conversational choices. Normally, in these kind of games, the conversational choices would shape your character, but not change the overall world all that much. But in Annayia, they seem to affect the world more and leave Annayia as a rude, sarcastic jerk, no matter what option I chose. The choices you make will determine which factions you help and which you don't, or to what capacity. When you beat the game, you are given a slideshow telling you how you impacted the world. Anyone who watched me play The Quarry might anticipate me having a rage-fueled monologue at this, but honestly, I really liked it. The difference is that in The Quarry, they boasted having 186 different endings, but all the endings turned out to be cue cards saying Jim died, Lisa lived, but you don't get real multiple endings, and you don't get any satisfaction, and you never see the characters interact with each other. There's just different cue cards you can see based off the choices you made, and that was really boring at the end of a long game like that. In Annayia, the cue cards are telling a story and letting you know how you impacted the world, or how you didn't, and how by missing an enemy you allowed it to grow stronger and do some serious damage to the people you love. I am not a completionist. I like to try and get as much of the game out as I can on the first run, but once it's done, I'm done. But seeing those cue cards and how I did or did not impact the world really want to make me go back and change some things. I was reading the story in these cue cards and I saw it refer to things that I had no idea what they were talking about. I'd clearly missed a chunk of this game. So instead of checking out, I ended up checking in harder. And while Annayia has no percent-based progression system, at least not at the time that I beat it, I have to assume that I'm now somewhere in the high 90 range based on the achievements and the world map. There's one area in the map that I cannot access. It is blocked off, and I have to assume that's story-based. Like, I didn't help somebody I was supposed to, or not when I was supposed to, and honestly, I'm okay with that. In fact, I think that's pretty cool. I can't say I'm drawn to start the game all over again just to see that little area, but nonetheless, the next time, if I do play this on hard, I definitely will be checking that out. The world Annayia lives in is gorgeous and hand-drawn, and the movement and your ability to traverse it is so smooth. I have heard people online saying that it's too visually distracting, or they have a hard time seeing what's in the foreground or what's in the background, but I honestly didn't have this problem. I felt the world was alive and lived in. Each biome had its own style and its own inhabitants. Even the save locations were slightly different versions of the same thing depending on where you were. Subtle touches like that help the world building immensely, and I really appreciate it. The story also progresses through data discs that you can pick up and look at in your journal after you find them. They aren't necessary, but they do give you a slightly deeper feeling of immersion. Some of the discs are in Morse code though, and being as I don't speak that, I kind of ignored them. Unfortunately, I do have some negatives when it comes to the storytelling. The voice acting, while appreciated, isn't very well done. I'm more happy to have it than to not, but had it been done really well, it could have sucked me in that much more. The second, much larger complaint is simply that I don't like Annayia very much. She feels rash and sarcastic and not much like somebody I want to spend 10 to 20 hours with. This is a personal take and you might feel differently, but for a game where I can make conversational choices, why can't I choose to be nice? Even when I choose the good option, it usually comes with a snide, "I'll be nice to this idiot" tone. Annayia, Life After Gods is a delightful first entry from a new studio, and deserves to be tested and tried. The world is gorgeous, the motion is fluid, the combat is fun, and the amount of choice it gives you is refreshing. At first. After a while, the combat gets too easy and you get stronger, but the enemies don't scale as fast as you do. The path you can take with weapons dwindle, and your upgrades are largely tied to combat, or are just unnecessary. The very last thing I did with the game before turning it off and doing this review was unlocking an enhancement that allows me to fly across the screen until I hit something. But where this ability in Hollow Knight unlocks a world of possibilities, I honestly can't think of anywhere I would use this at all, let alone need to use this. Maybe the swamp, but that was hours ago. I don't need to go back there. Anyways, I'm sure some of you are going to yell at me and tell me not to build the optimal build or to crank it to hard mode if I find it too easy, but this feels unfair to the point that I'm making. The game should get harder naturally, and instead it was foreshotting major bosses by the end of it. The story is serviceable, albeit a little confusing. And some of the missions feel way too fluffy, like they're just trying to pad the game's runtime without having to add additional gameplay. Most of the useful mechanics in the game you get early, and then you're just rinse and repeating until the game is over. The one sequence I did like late game was playing hide and seek with a monster in his doors. I won't go into it any further, but that added a new cool element to the late game, even if it was only for a room or two. Overall, Annayia is gorgeous, and it's fun, and it's probably one you should try out. There are some neat mechanics here and the developers are still adding and tweaking it, so hopefully it gets even better over time, but as of this recording, I'm giving Annayia a 7.5 out of 10. and I will definitely be paying attention to what Exogenesis Studios does next. All right, and that's my review for Annayia, Life After Gods. Let me know down in the comments if you think I was way too harsh on this or way too generous. I'd love to know what you have to say. I already know that I'm going to be doing Shadow Complex as my next Metroidvania review, but what game should I review after that one? I'd love to know your thoughts. Put a comment down below. We record games over at twitch.tv/The Mongooli Show, so head over there and give it a follow if you want to check me out while I play the games live, or if you want to see more reviews like this, hit like and subscribe on this video so that I see you in the next one.